The same thing that separates Bob Baffert. They're both of them conditioned their owners to understand that if you're going to get to the winner's circle on Triple Crown Saturdays and on Breeders' Cup days and in the biggest Grade 1 races, you've got to be hard on the horses.
Welcome to the Sports Night interview, and today we are joined by our good friend of the show, our go-to guy for all things horse racing. That's Steve Byk, host of At the Races, which you can hear Monday through Friday, 9 to 12 on SiriusXM radio. And Steve, I wish we were getting to gather here on better note, but of course we are here to discuss the life and legacy of Hall of Fame trainer, a titan in the game, Wayne Lukas, who passed away at the age of 89. I could think of no one better but yourself to bring on here today and discuss him. So thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure under the circumstances, but 89 years old and a life well lived by any measurement.
Yeah. Now, I know you've covered horse racing for a number of years, and I'm sure you've had plenty of opportunities to talk with Wayne. And so what I'm interested in is, do you have any like good personal stories that you could share with us to kind of paint us a better picture of who he was?
You don't necessarily need too many personal anecdotes for that. You pretty much, what you see with him and what you've seen over the years is him. There was no facade per se. What's fascinating about Lukas, where we arrived these last 15 years or so, is that this is a very different Wayne Lukas than you saw in the 70s and the 80s and into the 90s. He entered the game in the late 70s. When I say the game, I mean thoroughbred racing. He had already just overwhelmed the quarter horse industry earlier than that. In the late 60s to the late 70s, he burst on the scene basically in quarter horse racing and had the same, overwhelming success there that he was going to ultimately author on the thoroughbred side. But the Wayne Lukas that people first encountered was brash and as Jay Privman called him yesterday in a brilliant column at Daily Racing Form, caustic. And he was antagonistic. He was hyper competitive. And as a result, was not well liked by fellow trainers and other owners. He could be very charming with the media, but at the same time, he also created kind of a adversarial scenario. So that Wayne Lukas has been sort of lost to time. He outlived his own reputation as someone that was, not all that pleasant to be around. Now, personally, and in amongst, his own staff and in that regard, and with his owners, he was very generous and charming. Ultimately, that's where he arrived these last 15 years or so. But it kind of came, out of not necessity, but just out of the scenario. He got into his 70s and was not in demand the way he had been. He had outlived a lot of his best owners, and he found himself, kind of on his heels a little bit. 4 divorces didn't help that. And he had to, I won't say reinvent himself, but he had to make himself more attractive to a new era of potential owners. And what is amazing about him is that he was able to do that. And he didn't necessarily have the same amount of money to spend at the sales, although he did attract a very wealthy older owner in Willis Horton that he had good success with, Secret Oath and Will Take Charge. Mr. Horton was a free spender, but he was able to attract certain new potential owners that he won for. And so these last 15 years, there was this new, more palatable version of Wayne Lukas. This morning on my show, I called him, dare I say it, cuddly. I mean, he became kind of a grandpa and a Dutch uncle. And there's a whole generation, probably a couple of generations of player that and fan that think of him that way only and don't know the original incantation of Wayne Lukas, which was, I think the fair term is to call him his cutthroat. He would go after people's owners. He was an aggressive. He was professional, but he was aggressive, and he authored a success had really never been seen at that level before.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned was having to reinvent himself, and we all know his records in the Triple Crown races is unmatched. 15 wins in those races. Do you think there was one that meant the most to him? Was it his last and final Triple Crown win in the Preakness just a year ago, to kind of show his longevity and the success that he's had? Which one do you think meant the most to him?
I would guess Winning Colors. The Winning Colors, Lady Secret, the fillies that particularly Winning Colors, becoming only the third filly to win a Kentucky Derby. Winning Colors, particularly, I think if you asked him that he would have. I actually haven't read any of that kind of thing about if he had a specific, but Winning Colors, I know he took great pleasure in. And then I think, like I mentioned, Will Take Charge and Secret Oath. I think horses like that came late in his career for a new owner in Willis Horton, a guy that hadn't had that kind of success as a smaller time owner up until that point. I think that was very satisfying to him. I'll tell you that he sees the gray, not so much just because it was a Triple Crown event, but both that horse and the horse for the Churchill Downs Racing Club, Warriors Club. There were two things that happened in the last decade or so. One was Calumet Farm and Brad Kelly, who's rather reclusive. Brad Kelly gave us a statement today to read on the show, acknowledging he called it a privilege to work with Wayne. And Calumet, in addition to Brad Kelly helping save and perpetuate Calumet Farm, Brad Kelly giving horses to Wayne came at a very key juncture and was very good for Lukas at that point when he needed some fresh momentum and some new owners. And Calumet sort of put him back in the spotlight a little bit. So that helped. And then Gary Palmisano Jr., the young executive at Churchill Downs, the son of the late Gary Palmisano Sr., longtime fairgrounds-based trainer. Gary gave and tabbed Wayne for the Churchill Downs Racing Club, which is one of those low investment clubs, $500 buy-in, no expenses. Those are born by, in this case, Churchill and Wayne. And for $47,000, they get a horse to Wayne that proceeds to become a multiple graded stake winner. It's a story you could not have made up. And I happen to have been there when Warriors Club broke his maiden, or it might have been an allowance race, but I was at Churchill, and the hundreds of small time owners, people that never expected to ever get to the paddock at Churchill Downs or a winner's circle, they were crying, and it was just an unbelievable scene. And I actually, my own little stable, we did something very similar, $500 buy-in, and that happened for us at Saratoga. People got to the winner's circle at a place they always dreamed, and that came at a good time for Wayne as well. And Warriors Club, those 3 seasons or so, it was tremendous publicity for him. And all the owners and the families that came to the track, he was, at that point, he was bringing young people into the winner's circle. With every victory, he would pick out children, have them come into the winner's circle, try to, promote interest and get people involved. He did all the right things. And a lot of it stemmed from that era, from that, 10 years ago. And it authored this, late career success. Mm-hmm. And of course, Calumet's win in the Preakness with Oxbow, it's one of the most amazing things I've ever been around. Don't forget, not only, was it Calumet getting back to a Triple Crown win and Wayne getting a Triple Crown win, Gary Stevens had been retired for 5 years with knees that were shot. The whole thing was unbelievable. And here, Stevens comes back. He wins another Triple Crown race. He ends up, winning the Breeders' Cups with Beholder. And there was a lot of things about that circumstance that just had Wayne's fingerprints all over it. He was a force of personality and a force of nature, which had never, really had never seen before in racing. And you won't see again. I mean, there's people that are wildly successful, and, Baffert has caught him when it comes to Triple Crown wins. But Lukas did it at a time when there hadn't really ever been anybody, that overwhelming, operating literally coast to coast at the highest level.
Yeah. Thinking about all the success, we've touched on some of it. One thing we didn't touch on was some of the Eclipse Award winners he's had throughout his career. What is it about Lukas's program, his training philosophies and style, that separated him from everyone else?
The same thing that separates Bob Baffert. Both of them conditioned their owners to understand that if you're going to get to the winner's circle on Triple Crown Saturdays and on Breeders' Cup days and in the biggest Grade 1 races, you've got to be hard on the horses. Mm-hmm. This is not a great era to be hard on horses. There's pressure from animal rights activists that don't really understand the dynamics. Bloodstock has never been identifiable as livestock. If you understand the difference, but to trainers and to horsemen who came up in an era where, if you had to get through 3 or 4 horses for one owner to make it to the big races, you did it. And if there were horses along the way that couldn't stand up to the training regimen, that was acceptable. It's less acceptable now than it used to be. This is a very complex discussion, but Lukas and certainly Baffert, they put horses through a gauntlet so that they're prepared when they get to, whether it's the first Saturday in May, the third Saturday in May, or a mile and a half in the Belmont. And these are rigors that other trainers are not as want to do. And as a result, their horses get to those assignments and they're undertrained. There's trainers that are worried that they're going to alienate an owner if their horse gets hurt trying to get to the Triple Crown, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Baffert and Lukas, they didn't have to worry about that. They push the horses, and if they make it through, they'll be ready to succeed. And that's why they've had success.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people have copied that type of philosophy over the years to try to mimic some of their success. Lukas has revolutionized the sport in many ways, and we just touched on one of those ways with his intense training styles. But what do you think his most lasting legacy will be to the sport of horse racing?
Well, it's clearly his ability to train young horsemen that came up behind him. I mean, when you look at the litany of horsemen that came up under Lukas, starting with Todd Pletcher, Kieran McLaughlin, Mark Henning, Dallas Stewart, some people that are probably lesser known, including Randy Bradshaw, who trains 2-year-olds, prepares 2-year-olds for others. A guy by the name of Todd Quant, who the same thing, prepares horses for clients. But all of those trainers that have gone on to great success and have trained their own people to go on to success. All you have to do is look at journalism this year in the Triple Crown, and Michael McCarthy, who came up under Todd Pletcher. Jonathan Thomas came up under Todd as well. There's the training tree, as they call it. And it's not just limited to trainers that hang shingles. George Weaver, another guy who, George worked for Wayne and then went to work for Todd, and then went out on his own. There's also grooms and other assistants that don't necessarily go out and reach the next level. They end up in other people's barns as assistants and foremen and grooms. And so what Wayne taught on his shed row gets passed, elsewhere, and it grows sort of like a invasive weed, but in a healthy way. Wayne Lukas's horses had a certain look. The famous white bridles, which is something that he brought over from the quarter horse side. Then Todd perpetuated it, as has Dallas Stewart and others. I think that's probably the influence and the element of Lukas's impact that'll last the longest. There's other trainers that have had more stallions, that created more stallions, that'll leave an imprint on the breed. Baffert certainly, Todd Pletcher. But when it comes to the human quotient, the young horseman that came up under Wayne, I think that's probably what'll last the longest.
Yeah, well said. Very eloquent there. And I'll get you out of here on this. I saw you put this out on X. I thought it was great. And I think it says a lot. You said, "No one is bigger than the game, but Wayne was certainly as big." And so I think that says a lot right there. And I thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a few words on Wayne Lukas. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. One thing, I'll end on one note. One of the things about the sport that makes it just incredibly embraceable and enjoyable is the fact that we get to be in proximity to its participants. We're in proximity to the horses.
Right.
We're in proximity to the riders, and we're in proximity to the trainers. Anybody that takes an interest in racing can come to the racetrack in the morning or the afternoon or the evening, and you can interact with its participants. You can't say that about any team sports. You maybe can say it a little bit about golf and tennis and that kind of a sport. But this is a game anybody for years could go up to Wayne Lukas, shake his hand, and talk to him. And as a member of the media, I mean, the fact that I for 20 years have interacted with literally, arguably, the biggest and most important horseman in the game's history is, to me, is pretty remarkable. And that's something that anybody watching can participate in. You can go talk to Florent Geroux and Flavien Prat. Well, if you speak French, you can talk to them too. But and if you speak Spanish, you can talk to a whole bunch of jockeys. But you could also talk to plenty of English speaking riders. You can interact here. It's a game that invites its horse playing community and the fan community to be a part of it, and that's why people should take an interest and come to the racetrack, because you're a part of it the minute you step foot on the grounds.
Well said. And you might need to learn to speak a little Italian as well, with Rispoli and some of the other guys.
And Antonio Fresu and
right.
Vittori. And listen.
Steve Byk, everybody, host of At the Races, Monday through Friday, 9 to 12 on SiriusXM radio. Steve, as always, thank you so much for your time and all your great knowledge of the sport. Thank you so much.
Evan, my pleasure. Thank you.